Thank you. And so nice to see some familiar faces. Love to see you, lovely people, in this very, very heavy day and heavy week. So very grateful to be here today. Rose, I see that I don't have screen sharing uh, access. I can just go over my presentation without sharing the
No,
screen, if that's okay.
I can give it to you, I think.
Okay. So yeah, before I go to the presentation, I put together, I'm a PowerPoint type of person. I apologize for that. But otherwise I forget what I'm talking about. So I did put together something.
I just made you a co-host, so let's see if you can do it now.
Great. Let me see. Yes. Okay, now I don't see my presentation though. Let me go back to make sure that it's there. But just as a disclaimer, I'm going to share just briefly the plan that our partnership has put together. I'm going to talk a little bit about what partnership this is and present some of the data that was developed before coronavirus and before the shift. And ultimately, we have reached to the conclusion that however it is that we need to reach voters, we will need to reach voters. So the universes and a lot of the plans really have not changed. What is changing is the way that we're thinking how to reach those voters and how to talk to them. But we really didn't do major shifts in terms of our universe and our goals. And now the other disclaimer is that I really feel that these are so unstable times. That nothing is going to be as a regular electoral year, and we know that. So we're going to have to monitor what the current situation, the repression, the militarization of our communities means in terms of being able to mobilize voters and to also stay connected to the streets, because that's something that we'll have to do regardless. So I'm going to share my little presentation. You'll see it? Yeah. Oops. Okay. So in Florida, for the last 5 years, we have been building together with all these organizations that you see on the screen: Faith in Florida, SCIU Florida, Dream Defenders, Organized Florida, Central Florida Jobs with Justice, the Florida Immigrant Coalition, and New Florida Majority. We built what is called the Statewide Alignment Group, or SWAG. And this has been a process of really, for the last 5 years, building trust and acknowledging that it has been hard to work together in coalition, and that a lot of times organizations have been pulling to their corners, especially when there's an election and there's the funding issues and the universe and turf wars and all of that. So for the last 4 years or 5 years, we have been coming together regularly to put together a strategy for long-term power that is really founded in the trust amongst us and in dealing with the different nature of our organization, so that we can realize together the best of our potential. So we have been doing this, and now we worked together on the 2018 election, supporting Mayor Gillum for the governorship, and we all know how that went. But it was our first experiment in actually building programs like the practice of working together and being on the field together with these organizations. So this year we have the Florida for All campaign, and we have set up some imperatives for our electoral work this year. So we want to expand the electorate. The goal of SWAG for 2022 is expand the electorate by 2 million voters through the rights restoration that I don't know if you've been following, but we had a major victory, I think last week or 10 days ago, when the judge sided with us in eliminating the barriers around fees and restitution. So now people can register and can vote. And then we want another million voters through citizenship, through new citizens. So that's a 2 million more voters that we have a goal of by 2022. We definitely, of course, want to increase the turnout of voters of color. We want to expand our geographic footprint. So we are going to start expanding to rural areas, areas where with high numbers of migrant workers and first generation Mexican Americans or the sons and daughters of our farm workers and migrant workers in those counties. We're gonna try to persuade people, particularly MPA Latinx voters, because we think that there are many that are persuadable. And we were, of course, gonna mobilize our base, understanding that we need to stay in the communities, be in the communities, and mobilize our base this cycle and stay there for the long term. And then we definitely know that they're going to try everything in the book to suppress our vote. So we're going to fight against voter suppression. So we have plans for all of that. That's sort of like how we plan to expand our reach. Currently, we're mostly in Palm Beach, Broward. Our coalition is mostly in Broward, Palm Beach, Miami, Orlando, Tampa, the Tampa, St. Pete area, Duval County, and Gainesville and Tallahassee. So we're expanding to all those like rural areas that are in the light blue over there. Many of which are very red counties, but we believe that there's a way to actually squeeze in some votes on our side. Our universe is, we're planning to talk to 1.8 million voters this cycle throughout the state, mostly Black voters, Latinx voters, and there's a percentage there of white voters that we're gonna target. And this is sort of like some thoughts about how we're gonna target based on voter persuasion or voter partisanship and propensity. So we don't want to fall into the trap of like the low propensity voters. We want to talk to as many people as we can. And we know that the way to persuade voters to vote is actually by talking to them. So our universe actually goes from 0 propensity to 70 propensity voters. And 0 to say, and very partisan, 60% and up on partisanship. So people that we know are on our side, but we're gonna talk even to the people who have never voted before and try to convince them that this election is critical and nobody should stay home. We want to also expand our reach to voters. So our expansion universe is propensity from 70 to 100. 60% partisanship. And then our persuasion universe is mostly Latino voters, again, the MPAs, propensity from 0 to 70, but then partisanship, we're gonna be trying to talk to everybody that we can, that we know is persuadable. And then we are thinking and already putting in place a whole plan around targeting with intentionality. So in our partnership, we have these 5 constituency groups that are currently doing some polling, some focus groups, some research, like really digging into the data to understand very well within these groups how we're going to talk, what is the messaging that is going to be that is going to motivate people to stay engaged and get out and vote. Like, we don't want to just translate things into Spanish and assume that that's going to do it, right? We want to be super intentional in knowing that each group has its own needs and its own, and the message that will work for each of those. And so we're currently, these groups are led by people in our partnership that is very much in the work of doing all the research and all the focus groups and all that. And so there's going to be like a really interesting different layers of how do we do the work depending on who we're talking to. And then this is the part where I throw down the hardest, which is our organizing plan. So we are in total going to be hiring by the election 40 community organizers. And this is where people in our neighborhoods are going to be taking leadership roles by joining our organizing efforts to turn out their neighbors, to develop the skills and the long-term electoral strategy in the neighborhood so that we can not only win this time around, but actually build infrastructure in all of the neighborhoods and have folks really like leaders developed all over the place. So we are thinking a lot about community events. Before the pandemic, we were really getting super creative about the value and the power of cultural organizing. I am a firm believer that there is a place where scale and depth come together, and that is through culture. So, bringing people together through culture and then giving people the skills and the knowledge and the political development to then stay engaged and turn out to vote and turn their neighbors out. Now we are in the virtual world, so we're trying to be creative and do things that are culturally relevant in the virtual world, which is definitely not my wheelhouse, but we're doing stuff and it's fun. And luckily we have young people in our team that are coming up with all kinds of cool stuff. I don't know if you've seen, but like the Dream Defenders are doing their Sunday schools, which are super amazing. And so people are doing really great stuff. There's like a very powerful digital team that is going to be doing all kinds of digital stuff that are, again, not not what I do, but I know that it's coming up with all kinds of super creative and fun and effective ways of talking to voters in the digital world. And then I just wanted to share this picture because last year we launched a canvas of 1,200 people all at the same time during the United We Dream convention in Miami. And so we launched and brought back these 1,200 young people to the streets of Miami. So there's a lot of organizers in our team that have a lot of experience dealing with a lot of tensions and a lot of difficult things and challenges. And we usually come to the other side, at least in one piece. All of the young people went back home. We are gonna be aggressively pushing for vote by mail. And this was mini Trump Desastre, we call him, Governor Desastre. They're trying their hardest to suppress the vote by setting barriers to vote by mail. And so we're fighting hard. We did file a lawsuit against the state, against the governor, and it's currently in the courts. We did that together with the Advancement Project because during the primary election on March 17, obviously the pandemic was already a huge problem and they still had the vote in person. There were some precincts that had poll workers who then turned out to be infected. And so some people were not, and nobody called the voters to tell them that they need to check and go get a test. And so, we have members who voted in precincts that where cases were reported and nobody told them anything. And so that's just one of the many arguments we have to make sure that people are able to vote by mail. And so hopefully, and so the idea is that vote by mail will be universal and that we will do a very hard effort to get, through all these touches and all these passes to make sure that people get their ballots, apply for their ballots, get their ballots and vote, and then we'll chase it. And then together with that, and what I consider is a fundamental piece of voter protection, of voter protection is like vote by mail to me is part of voter protection, right? And the two things go together. And so we have we always have a partnership with some groups, some local and national groups that do voter protection, and we train a lot of our members and a lot of our volunteers to do voter protection. We educate people at every meeting that we have, and we do, poll site to GOTV protection. We have a hotline. We deploy attorneys on the ground, just making sure that they don't play the games that they always play, and that they've tried, they don't succeed. And this is sort of like the campaign timeline. Again, this was developed before coronavirus. So we are sort of like operating under the same timeline, but instead of the canvas, we have a huge phone bank program where we're going to be touching voters several times on the phones. Hopefully, we will be able to deploy people in the field, but that determination is going to be done as things progress. But yeah, currently our primaries are in August 18. And so we currently are already starting to build the volunteer base and the infrastructure and the paid program to start talking to voters ahead of the August primary. And we'll be probably by mid-June, end of June, we're going to be full force all the way in to make sure that people go out and vote in August. There's many elections down the ballot that we're very interested in, and our partnership has already started making endorsements and fielding candidates and all that stuff. So one of the things, so going back here, so one of the things that we're discussing, and now with the situation and the crisis that is out there with policing and racial injustice, is that there are several state attorney races that we really think that we can have a leverage on. And so we're interviewing state attorney candidates, and we have a whole program around state attorneys and sheriffs that we really are interested in seeing and determining whether that is going to motivate folks on the ground to go out and vote and get active and get engaged. And there's a couple of state attorneys that we're really excited, hopefully can be successful, because we think that we can hold them accountable, that there's a relationship and also like an ability for us to leverage that will, create a layer of accountability that we've never had in Florida with state attorneys before. So then in terms of like, how do we not fall into the permanent cycle of in and out of electoral cycles and rebuilding from the ground up after the election each time? We have been, for the last 2 years, super clear that none of this matters if we don't build for the long haul. And so we are building an organization, and this is New FM. This is outside of the SWAG. This is our work to build permanent presence and infrastructure in our organization. We have been working on an organizing model that can stay and that will stay for the long haul. And so the building blocks of our organizing is our people's assemblies, following the tradition and the legacy of people's assemblies elsewhere, Mississippi, but also las asambleas populares. We are bringing people together in the neighborhoods every month to diagnose the local issues, to come up with local solutions, and to organize and develop leaders locally, inviting people from all across the neighborhoods to just come and gather with us. So we have people's assemblies in 7 neighborhoods across the state every month, where we bring 30, 40 people every month to talk and again, discuss the local issues and sort of build local leaders and campaigns that we can use to leverage local power. Today we had our People's Assembly from Broward County successfully had an action around housing and an eviction moratorium. It was just announced by that we're going to expand the eviction moratorium. So we are today, in the midst of all the pandemonium, are celebrating a small victory, but it's a significant victory for a lot of people. So that's our Broward People's Assembly's work. And then we also invest heavily in training and developing the political analysis of our members and our leaders. And this year, we started putting it together last year, but this year we are implementing our School of Unity and Power, SOUP, which is really cool because before the pandemic, it was not just a training, it's a curriculum, it's a 6-session curriculum around ideology, the ideology of the 1% versus the ideology of our people, anti-neoliberal, anti-capitalist ideology. We also train people around the history of voter suppression, the history of mass incarceration, economic justice, climate justice. It's a 6-session program. Um, and before the pandemic, we incorporated actual soups into our trainings because soup is the food of the poor and food of the resistance in many ways. When people are hungry, they take whatever they have, add some spice and water, and make soup for the whole community to be nourished. And so we would share soup from different countries. People would bring their own soups to the training and we will share. So that was just like a beautiful thing that we would do. So now we're doing it online, but we're sharing recipes that people share in addition to the training. And then hard skills. So we also make sure that each session, that everybody leaves each session with like the tools and the hard skills to do the work in the field afterwards. And the idea is it's a cohort and then people graduate. Currently, we're training about 220 people every week because we're also training our canvassers that are currently phone bankers for our campaign. So that is all the presentation. Oh, no, there's one more slide because it's a very important slide, which is really like the purpose of all of these, like the thing that keeps me going and gives me purpose every day is that we're super clear that we are organizing towards people's governance. So we are shifting our organization into a much more member-led organization. This last year in November, we had our first statewide People's Assembly where people from across the state came together to learn and to share, but also to participate directly in our endorsement process. And our members endorsed Elizabeth Warren for president on a ranked choice vote system, and it was beautiful. And we are from that taking it a step further and identifying people to really help us shape the organization, join our board of directors, creating like a statewide steering committee. So we're really like being much more intentional in the investment of our members in the decision making of our organization, which would hopefully one day become leaders that will have decision making power in the state, right, and run for office. And we have already a couple of members who have been running for office, and so that's really exciting. And that is all I have. I don't know if I'm past the time or I still
You're
have.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you so much, Serena, for your leadership and for walking us through all the work that you've all been doing. And so we have some questions that I'm just gonna put out there. The first one is, how did you come up with your outreach plan? And, you know, as you answer your question, if you could also talk a little bit about how you all assessed partisanship and voter propensity, you know, how those numbers fit into the decision behind your outreach plan, specifically for those of us who might be new to electoral work and might be unfamiliar with these terms.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that know a lot more than me about targeting. So just that as a disclaimer, but I would say, so one thing is that we know that the VAN and the systems that folks use to target are very skewed and not accurate and a lot of times very racist. And so we know that. And so we are very clear that there are areas of the state that we're not going to leave behind regardless of what the data and the VAN and the people behind the VAN tell us with the modeling that they use. Like the modeling is a lot of times leave our people out. I remember last time in 2018, our organizers were wondering why their own neighborhoods where they live, like Black working class neighborhoods, were not included in the universe that the modeling told us to go talk to get Mayor Gillum elected. So we are super aware, and at the same time, these are the tools that we have. So I think it's a lot, and you know, more people in this call probably understand targeting a lot better than I, but I think that there's like that is the water that we navigate to determine where we're going to be at. So for example, for the MPAs, there's been a lot of like research done about Latinx MPAs and their reactions to the leadership of Donald Trump. A lot of them voted for Trump last time around. Most people in the Latinx community are not registering Democrats or Republicans. They're staying non-party affiliation. So we know that, for example, the modeling and the van is not going to have them as Ds, but we need to figure out who they are. So there's a lot of like research, a lot of like polling that goes into it. So there's like many layers. We're talking to women, so we know that with Black women, obviously, we're going to talk to all Black women, and we're not going to get them taken for granted, even though we know they're the most reliable vote for the Democratic Party. But at the same time, we know that there's a lot of like white women, for example, that are super disenchanted with Trump, that even voted for him last year. That might be the margin that we need, right? So we need to be intentional in figuring out where are all the votes that we can go get. So yeah, it's a complicated science. I cannot answer fully, but yeah.
Great. And on that note of voter engagement, we have a question about how voter engagement work looks like for Latinx and Black voters, and what does your organization find the most effective?
To Latinx, so one of the things is that we know that the Black-brown unity that we all want doesn't happen just because we want it, right? And so we need to be we try to be intentional in knowing that folks need their own organizing spaces, and we need to create also the organizer spaces where everybody can struggle through together and bring together the analysis needed, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to happen in the Latinx community. You know, Florida, in the Latinx community, even in the Puerto Rican community, Florida has been leaning Republican, and it's sad. And that's a lot of work that we need to do around anti-Blackness and racism, and also, you know, like the things that people bring from their own countries around the left and the hang-ups that people have with processes in Latin America, that then when they get to Florida, it all gets very complicated. So that is a conversation that only happens through organizing, honestly. And so we are investing heavily in areas where nobody has ever organized. Like we are in a Venezuelan neighborhood in Doral, where nobody has ever organized there before, other than the Venezuela right-wingers and the Cuban right-wingers, right? So we are actually inserting ourselves in pretty hostile territory, but really having conversations that are very meaningful and discovering that a lot of people actually want change. And then in the Black community, you know, we have been in these neighborhoods for a long time. Our partners, our organizations have been building there for a long time. And at the same time, the Democratic Party has been neglecting and completely. So we are actually filling in a gap that the Democratic Party purposely has abandoned. And we're clear about that. So one of the things that for us is super important is to be clear with folks that we're an independent political organization, that we're building independent political power, and that we're actually inserting ourselves where the party has abandoned, and having the conversations that the party has refused to have with people because they have been taking them for granted.
Great, thank you. There's another question about the SWAG, or the statewide coalition that you've all been building over the 5 years. And so there's a question about, you know, how have these relationships with other organizations evolved since you all started doing electoral work together? And then I guess to that I would add, like, what are some lessons in coalition building that you have learned in the process?
Yeah. So this is something that I'm actually super excited to talk about. Cut me out because I talk a lot. But so I was in the first SWAG meeting before it was SWAG. It was just the groups that thought that it was good and a good idea to come together and start thinking long term. And I was in the first retreat 5 and some years ago. And the thing that we did there was super interesting because I think it helped inform how it will relate in the long term, which is that even if we didn't know, even if we knew that there were a lot of tensions and people will always, like, you know, pull into their own side, we were able in that retreat to come up with 5 priorities for 2022. And we did that day. So we knew that day, that in that weekend, that we wanted to expand the electorate by 2 million voters. We wanted to recruit 40,000 new dues paying members, which is still the goal. That we wanted to train 5,000 militant people, leaders, members. That we wanted to flip certain counties and certain particular strategic districts and stuff, like electoral goals. And then there was a 5th goal that I don't even remember. But those 5 sort of like buckets of work came out of the first retreat. And so then there was the work of, okay, if we want to do this, which is pretty awesome and will help us win Florida for forever, how are we going to actually build the trust and build the capacities and build the infrastructure and bring in the money that is needed to do that? So I think that having like the eye in the prize from the get-go was very helpful. And then I was out of the meeting, so I know that there was a lot of like, it's not being like honeymoon, but it has worked before because we've never, I think that all organizations never took the eye out of the prize. And so we're all working towards the same clearly stated goals.
Great, thank you. And on the note of partnership, would you talk to the participant members about the phone banking that New Florida Majority is doing with the support of Seed the Vote and how that's going?
Absolutely. So before the pandemic, New Florida Majority had a crew of almost 200 part-time voter registration canvassers that were doing voter registration. That's what they do, and they did it every day with huge goals of 100,000 new voter registrations for the year. But then the pandemic came, and obviously they were not able to be out there on the streets, so we shifted them into calling first through our list of supporters, which we had like 40,000 people in our database. And then when they ran out of calls on that side, they started calling voters. And the calls that they have been making all this time are wellness check calls, right? To check on people, how they're doing, whether they're getting evicted, whether they lost their job, what they need, and then sharing important information between resources and also campaigns, agitations, petitions that they can sign to help us fight. And that has been, and one of the questions that what people have been asking, the canvassers have been asking on these calls is whether people want to stay engaged and volunteer with us. And so out of that, we had, I think that right now we're at past 4,000 people that we have talked that had said, sure, I want to volunteer with you for the majority. So we don't have capacity to do all those calls, following up on all these people to try to engage them. But at the same time, they're like low hanging fruit, people that are ready to go with us, that are happy to help us. So we needed support to try to have these conversations and engage them further, schedule one-on-ones with our organizers, invite them to a people's assembly if they live in the area where we are organizing. And so Seed the Vote has been amazing in throwing down and helping and having these conversations. And I would love to hear from some of the callers that I know are here in this meeting too, to see how it's been going. We have been following with some of the people. We are making the calls, scheduling the one-on-ones, and hopefully out of those calls, we will grow our organization and grow our leaders and our members. So that's the whole thing.
Great, thank you. So I just made an ask on the chat box for folks to feel free to use it to share a little bit about their experience doing phone banking with you. Well, thank you so much, Serena, for your wonderful presentation and for the work that you're all doing. We're so happy to be in partnership with you and look forward to strengthening our relationship in the months ahead and supporting the work that you're all doing. So I think we started a tradition of unmuting our phones to clap for our presenter. So can we go ahead and do that?
Thank you so much. Woo! Hi, Marcy. I read the book.
Thank you.
So great to see you all. Thank you.